Hello and welcome to Good Morning America Health. I'm Rob Simmelcare. Let's talk about sex, shall we? And the important impact that healthy sex can have on your relationship and what to do when Mr. or Mrs. Right isn't quite right with the sex. In fact, it may be all wrong. Can that issue right there be fixed? Joining us to help sort out that issue are two sex and relationship counselors and goodinbed.com contributors. That's right, Ian Kerner and Belisa Vranic. Doctors, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
Good morning.
All right, so this is something that I have heard as a problem with folks. How common is it that you see two people who want to be together, they're great friends, they get along on every level, but the sex just doesn't work?
It happens all the time. You have a couple get together and they're best friends. They work well during the day. They're great parents. They really like each other. But behind closed doors in the bedroom, they're not as compatible as they'd like to be.
And you know what's really interesting is at the start of a relationship, you know, you're in that hot and heavy phase and there's all those infatuation hormones. Those hormones actually mask differences in sexual temperament because you're so excited and into the person, you really have to go through a relationship for a little while before you realize that you may be incompatible sexually.
That is very interesting, and that can explain a lot of what you see in relationships sometimes where there's a peak and then they just sort of fall out.
Totally.
So what do you do, I guess is the question. I mean, for starters, one thing I wonder, are there situations where it just can't be fixed, where maybe two people are just not a match? And if so, how do you know whether it's you're not a match or you just need to work on things?
Well, you have to start with sort of disbanding the myths. And it's not something easy to pick out. It's not about the size of your shoe or how you dance or how you walk. That really doesn't tell you anything at all. It has to do with...
I think you were talking about something else. I'm not going to go there. Okay.
Your dancing has nothing to do with it. What happens is that once you get over that honeymoon phase and real life kicks in, and that it's not your representative who's in the bedroom anymore, it's really the person who, true person comes through as far as what you're like sexually, that's when you need to start having really good conversations about compromising.
Yeah, and you know, I actually, in my work, I've discovered there are kind of two sexual types. There are thrill seekers and there are comfort creatures. For example, you know, speaking honestly, I'm a comfort creature, and luckily my wife is a comfort creature too. You know, we enjoy same bed, same time, kind of same routines. The problems really begin when you take a thrill seeker and a comfort creature and you try and put them together. That's kind of when the clashes begin.
Should everyone know which they are? I mean, I guess probably by a certain point in your life, you probably can look and say, I really am this way or that way, right?
You should know what you are, and you should also know which way you can bend a little bit to meet your partner in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, luckily, the brain really is the biggest sex organ. So, you know, if you really do talk to your partner and share fantasies and you have that open communication, a little goes a long way once you start talking. I mean, the problem is when there's no communication, there's no fantasy, there's no middle ground, then you're just left with sort of, I'm a thrill seeker who's not being satisfied, and I'm a comfort creature who's kind of being pushed out of my comfort zone.
So communication is a key here. It sounds like most elements of a relationship, you got to talk.
You have to.
How do you bring some of this stuff up? It can be uncomfortable, especially in a relationship that maybe is a little bit new.
Well, you have to make sure that the vocabulary that you use and the way you approach someone isn't in a defensive way, isn't in an aggressive way, and that you pick a good time to talk about it as well. So it's more about finding out how that person feels safe and what are the things that you might be able to push a little bit farther in order to get them to feel comfortable to do different things.
Yeah, I just had patients fairly recently, and the guy's fantasy was a threesome. You know, kind of one of the most common fantasies.
Indeed.
He's like, every birthday, that's what he wanted. And, you know, his wife was like, no way, this is never going to happen. And, you know, they were both so polarized around this, and they came to my office and we started talking about it, and I just gave them an assignment, which was to pretend that they were going to do it and to sort of make it a little secret between themselves that they were going to pretend to do this, but to go out and talk about like what was attractive about it. If they were to ever do something like this, what would their type be? And you know what? Never had to do anything actually in the real world. Just the talking about it, the pretending, the planning, that was enough to really bridge the gap between the two of them.
Very interesting. Now, gender differences here.
Yeah.
How common is it? I typically would think, okay, the guy is going to be the thrill seeker, the woman's going to be the comfort creature. Is that typically the case?
Not always. Again, it's something you can't tell from the outside. Sometimes your wildest looking person is quite calm in the bedroom and sedate, and it's your person who's very sort of proper, that's the wild one in bed.
Yeah, I mean, you really can't predict. I mean, it is true. I mean, and Belisa and I talk about this, that, you know, men can more easily compartmentalize between emotion and sex.
Yes.
And so once you leave the emotion off the table, it is easier to find yourself in those thrill-seeking situations, you know. So I think because women are so integrated emotionally when it comes to sex, sometimes that does stop a woman who might be a thrill seeker from pursuing those situations.
All right, so before we go, 5 words or less, Dr. Vranich, what's your advice if a couple they like each other, but they're not sexually doing it in the bedroom?
Sit down, talk about it, and if you need more information, go to goodinbed.com.
All right, thank you guys very much. Dr. Vranich, Dr. Kerner, thanks for joining us. Don't forget, you can follow ABC News Now on Facebook and Twitter. Just search ABC News Now.